Weird things you didn't know about Marcus Aurelius. You probably know Marcus Aurelius as a Stoic philosopher and Roman emperor, but did you know that he was also a bit of a weirdo? In this video, we'll explore some of the weird things you didn't know about Marcus Aurelius. So watch the video until the end. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor who ruled from 161 to 180 AD. He was one of the most important figures of the Roman Empire and is considered one of the most successful rulers in history. Aurelius was a great military leader and conquered many lands during his reign. He was also a wise and just ruler, and he is remembered for his philosophy and writings. Marcus Aurelius was born into a wealthy and influential family. His father was a Roman senator and his mother was a member of a prominent family. His father died when he was only 3 years old, leaving him in the care of his grandparents. Marcus Aurelius's father died when he was only 3 years old, leaving him in the care of his grandparents. Aurelius's grandfather, Marcus Antonius, was a celebrated Roman general who had served with distinction in the war against Hannibal. Antonius's wife, Julia Maesa, was a wealthy and influential woman. Thanks to their influence, Aurelius received a good education and was taught by some of the best philosophers of his day. Aurelius's grandfather died when he was only 9 years old, and his grandmother, Julia Maesa, took charge of his education. Under her guidance, Aurelius studied rhetoric, literature, and philosophy. He also spent time learning about military strategy and tactics. When he was old enough, he enrolled in the Roman army and served with distinction in a number of campaigns. Marcus was raised in a privileged environment and had the opportunity to receive an excellent education. He became interested in philosophy at a young age and began studying the works of the Stoics. And he was the first emperor to adopt the philosophies of Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most famous and influential Roman emperors, but one thing you may not know about him is that he was also one of the strangest. And here are some weird things you might not know about him. It was a warm day in Rome when Marcus Aurelius's mother went out to get milk from the local market. She never came back. Marcus waited for days, but she never returned. He eventually came to the realization that she was gone forever. Marcus was just a child when his mother disappeared, but this event had a profound effect on him. It made him question the nature of the universe and whether or not there was meaning to it at all. Marcus went on to become one of the most famous philosophers of his time, and his work has continued to inspire people for centuries. Marcus Aurelius's mother's disappearance was a tragedy, but it also led to some of the most important philosophical questions of all time. The Hipster trendsetter. Marcus Aurelius was a trendsetter in his time. He was known for his strong sense of style, and he was always ahead of the curve when it came to fashion. In fact, many believe that Marcus Aurelius was the first hipster. He was always rocking the latest trends, and he had a unique way of putting his own spin on things. Marcus Aurelius married his foster sister, Faustina the Younger, in 145 CE. Faustina was about 8 years younger than Marcus and was the daughter of his father's co-emperor, Antonius Pius. The marriage was political in nature and was intended to solidify the alliance between the two emperors. Marcus and Faustina had 14 children together, including 6 sons and 8 daughters. Only 4 of their sons survived to adulthood. Marcus was very fond of his wife and was said to be devastated by her death in 176 CE. Marcus Aurelius was one of the most powerful men in the world. He was a Roman emperor, and he was also a great philosopher. But despite all his power and wisdom, Marcus Aurelius was heartbroken too many times. First, Marcus Aurelius was heartbroken by the death of his father. Then, he was heartbroken by the death of his brother. And finally, he was heartbroken by the death of his wife. Each time Marcus Aurelius tried to find comfort in his philosophy, but it was never enough. Marcus Aurelius was a great man, but he was also a human being. And like all human beings, he was vulnerable to the pain of love and loss. You may be surprised to learn that Marcus Aurelius was the last of the 5 good emperors. The 5 good emperors were Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antonius Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. They are so called because they brought prosperity to Rome and made it into an empire unlike any other time before or after them. This happened during their reigns as rulers over Rome, which lasted from 117 to 180 AD, and brought stability to an empire that had been plagued by wars since its founding by Caesar Augustus in 27 BC. Marcus Aurelius was an epileptic. The emperor's seizures were so severe that he often took to his bed and would have to be carried when he was out in public. Although many people thought this was a sign of weakness, it was actually a sign of strength. If you're seized by an epileptic fit while your army is on the march and your enemies are crashing all around you, can't someone else take over as commander? That's what Marcus Aurelius did when he had one such seizure while leading his troops into battle against the Marcomanni tribe in 163 BC. Afterward, he continued serving as general until his death. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius was a champion of religious tolerance. As we all know, the Roman Empire was a melting pot of different religions and cultures. And while it was certainly not an ideal situation to live in, it did allow for people to express themselves freely without fear of persecution or persecution. However, Marcus Aurelius wasn't just tolerant. He actively encouraged other religions as well by writing multiple books on each one that was published after his death, though only 2 have survived. Some scholars believe these books were written specifically for other kings who wanted advice on how to best run their own kingdoms. Others think they were meant purely out of curiosity by Marcus Aurelius himself. Either way you look at it, though. Marcus Aurelius was once captured by barbarian tribes. The Marcomanni tribe, a Germanic people who lived along the Danube River, took him captive. He was only released after paying a ransom of 100 pounds of gold and precious jewelry. The emperor's journey from Rome to Vienna would have taken him across some of Europe's worst roads at the time, thanks to barbarian invasions, but he managed it nonetheless. Marcus Aurelius was a huge history nerd. He wrote his own version of the history of Rome, which is more than just an abstract idea. It's a book filled with facts from ancient Rome that we still use today. He read tons about what happened before there were books written down, like how cavemen used sticks to make fires, as well as how cavemen made fire using sticks and then used their hands. He also loved poetry. You may not know this because poetry wasn't really appreciated back then, but Marcus Aurelius loved reading poems. They helped him understand human emotions better than any other type of writing could do. In the year 180 AD, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius was assassinated by his own military commander, Commodus, his own son. Marcus Aurelius was a great leader and brought peace and prosperity to the Roman Empire. However, his successor, Commodus, was a cruel and tyrannical ruler. Under his rule, the empire became corrupt and unstable. In 192 AD, a group of Roman citizens rose up against Commodus and assassinated him. As one of the most respected philosophers of his time, Marcus Aurelius was known for his deep thoughts and wise words. So it may come as a surprise to some that his final words were "killed many Germans." It is unclear why Aurelius said this, but it is possible that he was referring to his military campaigns against the Germans. Aurelius was a successful military commander and is said to have killed many enemies in battle. Some historians believe that Aurelius's final words were a reflection of his own mortality. As a great thinker, he may have been pondering his own death and what it meant for the world. Whatever the reason for his final words, Marcus Aurelius was a man of great intelligence and accomplishment. His words continue to resonate with people centuries after his death. So there you have it, a quick rundown of Marcus Aurelius, one of the most famous and weird Roman emperors. We hope you found this video interesting and informative. And if you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.